Hey everybody, Joey with Tactical Response here. Thank you for watching. So, what I have for you today is part 2 of a podcast style talk that we did with Paul and Jared over at Student of the Gun. So this is the second part, and if you're interested in the first part, go ahead and click the link that is in the description down below. We had a very good conversation, in my opinion, even if we did all agree with each other. So it was just a bunch of, yeah, you're right, I agree, you're right, right? But very good conversation over what is dangerous training. So again, this is part 2. Head on over there for part 1, and I hope you guys enjoy.
First of all, the rocket launcher is kind of always loaded.
Yeah.
I was just trying to clean it.
Unless you're, an AT4 is like, is it loaded? I don't know. Can you see through it? Is it just an empty tube? Because if it's not just an empty tube, there's a rocket in there. But it all comes down to, the misunderstanding or the institutionalized stupidity that we all have to fight every single day. That the military, they have these safety stand down briefings. Somebody gets capped negligently, and so they shut down the base, they shut down the world. They're like, we've got to figure out what happened. I'll tell you what happened. You train these turds to treat guns like stage props, and then somehow live ammo got in their hands and somebody got shot, and they're like, how does this happen? I'll tell you how it happens. It happens because you don't allow them to have loaded guns. And you just expect to be able to magic them into competency when the war starts or the battle starts or the whatever. My first big experience with this was in, Gulf War I, the Great War, the Great Desert War. When we were in the Great Desert War, dudes, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, they were capping each other like nobody's business. NDs were just like rampant, and we would continuously have these mandatory safety. The lieutenant would come.
Would you say most of those NDs happened while they were trying to clear weapons?
No, not always. Most of the time, they're just like they would literally negligently press the triggers.
It was branch rivalry, is what it was. The Army dudes were like, "Fuck you, Marines," and the Marines were like, "Oh yeah, you want to see this?"
we weren't with each other. We were all segmented. But I had an ND. I was sitting. We were actually on the border of Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, and I was sitting in an open fighting hole, and a dude was standing next to me. So he's up here, and I'm sitting down, my feet in the hole, and I had my Walkman. See, we had these things called Walkman. They had little square, rectangular, plastic things, and I'm listening, and wham! The sand right about 2 feet away from me kicks up. And I look up at him, and he's standing there like the snake that bit him, right? He's got an M9, the M9 in his
ready
hand.
To pull the trigger again.
And I reach up, and I grab the M9 out of his hand, and I pull the magazine out, and he's like, dude, there was a round in the chamber. I'm like, no shit.
Yeah, there's not anymore.
And I said, dude, why did you stroke the trigger? I thought the chamber was empty. See, he knew that there was a magazine in the gun. He knew it. He saw there was a magazine in the gun, but he thought I thought it was a condition 3 weapon. And you say, well, that guy's obviously an idiot. No, that guy is a product of the training he's been given. He was a product of what he'd been taught. He'd been taught that unless you're in the process of shooting, all guns have empty chambers. It's okay to put a magazine in it because it keeps the dust out. But unless we're in the process of shooting, then, and so all of a sudden, and that happens all the time. We take these kids and we give them negligent training, and then we drop them into a realistic situation. We're like, okay, function properly now. Don't shoot yourself or other people, and good luck. And we wonder, why are they shooting themselves? Why are they shooting other people? Why are they shooting television sets and barracks walls and stuff like that? Why does this happen?
All the stuff.
All the stuff.
Yep. Lewis, what you got?
So I had kind of just a couple bullet points like to ask, I knew how you guys would feel about some of them, like, hot range 180 rule. Like for us, like running a hot range is not dangerous training, right? Breaking the 180 rule, not dangerous training. I think we're all in agreement on that. Where are you guys at with like the 1 meter rule or muzzle rule for like a CQB, angles near your buddies, shooting past buddies to hit bad guys?
Don't point the gun at your buddy while you're shooting the bad guy.
Okay. So
I mean, you've got a couple different your goal is right to press the trigger perfectly with your front sight focused perfectly on the target and hit the target. Is your buddy a target or is the bad guy a target?
Right. And so you would say basically right up to buddy meet, basically, if it's
you also have to consider
offset.
The offset, and is the gas going to blow back on your buddy's ear? And freaking, this is really situationally dependent, I think.
But in terms of in training, do you guys, if you guys are doing a CQB class or something like that, do you tell everybody like try and have like 3 feet off the tip of your buddy's rifle when you're closing down your sector, or do you go right to his muzzle brake, like right off the edge of it? Where do you guys draw your line on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that line has to be drawn again based on, the line is going to vary based on who you're talking to. For instance, if you've got someone there like, well, I've had a gun for a long time, but this is my first professional training class, there's no way I want that guy, just because there's going to be a nervousness factor.
Oh yeah.
Right there. There's that nervousness factor. Now that, you've got other people who've been, I wouldn't have a problem with my peers, like the totem pole of death kind of thing, I would never do the totem pole of death with an introductory level class. I just wouldn't, because there's too many things that can go wrong, and you can't stop all those things from going wrong. There's no way you can interject yourself. It's one thing if just one dude is standing there and he goes to turn around and you're like, whoa, hang on a second. And you grab him. But if you got 3 dudes all moving, you're not going to be able to put your hand in and stop all 3 of the muzzles from going where they need to go. So the development of that, what you're saying is like, 1 meter. And that's great. That's what you need to have, because you've got to establish some kind of boundary for people. But as Jared said, something that we need to understand is it's not just the bullet. It's like, especially with rifles, escaping gas.
Yeah, and do they have a comp brake on it, or they got a silencer? What's going on here?
Yeah, they show up with a freaking.
They hate their neighbor.
Yeah, well, I hate the people next to me.
And I ask because, I've heard a lot out there, the 1 meter off your buddy's muzzle. Like, don't come within that meter. But then I was doing a CQB thing at the Night Ops Summit with Chuck Pressberg was teaching some CQB stuff. And he was like, if you follow 1 meter, you get 4 dudes in a little room, like nobody can take a shot. Yeah. Like you may be shooting right off your buddy's silencer, taking that angle, because he needs you to make that shot right then and there. You don't have time to try and get an angle that gives you that meter bubble. Yeah.
But so, it's establishing a essentially setting a precedent or establishing a boundary. And then like, this is the expectation. And then as you prove yourself, and it's like anything, and that's how all training should be. All training should be, all right, you come here, you prove yourself, and then we give you a little bit more of a challenge and a little bit more of a challenge and a little bit more of a challenge. And that's the dance that we do. the dance that we do as instructors is how do we intrinsically know it's time to challenge the students? There have been times when I've had another drill planned and I pull the ripcord on it. I'm like, no, we're not ready for that yet.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if we were, but we're not ready for that yet.
So dangerous training takes students' ability into account, right?
Yep.
Like snake drill, like you said from Hackathorn.
Yeah.
That at like a concealed carry, this is the first time they're touching a gun class. Like this is going to be dangerous. Like this is a no-go for
Recklessly
me.
dangerous.
But,
Yeah.
Right.
But if I've had the same students in class for 3 days straight, and have
you put them in a
good
car and have them shoot out the moving car.
Yeah. Would you put them in a car and have them shoot from a moving vehicle? Dude, we're going to have lunch with John at SHOT. We've got a lunch date scheduled with him. And just that, that idea that I don't want to say it was the Wild West, but man, if you were to, that kind of stuff is like Delta Force level stuff.
Well, you were in the West and it is pretty wild. So
yeah, we were up in the mountains doing like crazy stuff. And you said that Jared, when you earlier said about the hockey stick, about you realizing, wow, the instructor actually isn't stupid.
Yeah.
That was my epiphanous moment. I was shooting a GI stock 1911. It was a rental gun because I wasn't old enough to buy a handgun, right? And while we're driving, I'm shooting out of the V. I've got the door propped open. I'm holding it with my right foot, and I had a stoppage. I probably let the slide touch the door, right? That probably happened. So instantly and immediately I went wham, wham, and I emptied the gun. And then we stopped and reset, and I had took some deep breaths, and I'm like, holy crap, that worked.
Yeah.
I didn't stop to think, oh no, my gun's not making noise. What should I do? I instantly went wham, wham, and finished, and I emptied the gun. So, I mean, it probably took me all of 1.25 seconds to do that. And that's when I had wow, if you practice this stuff, it will work when you need it to be there. And that was at the ripe old age of 19 years old.
Now, there is a caveat to that. The gaining rapport, that graph, is that the student has to be a good student.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Park ego here.
Just to touch on something that you brought up earlier when you were talking about the military, right? And being like, why is this happening? One of our good buddies, Brian Sayers, he has a phrase that he uses in his every night pistol class, which is the training is working. So when you have these guys who are doing what you would think would be off the wall shit, like why would they do that right then? Well, it's because of how they were trained. So touching on the positive versus negative, like training, right, kind of stuff. What is something that you see out there? I know I gave a few examples earlier, but something that is like a common thing that you do think is like going to get someone killed in one of these other classes, like the unloads show clear all the time. It can be
Snapping
as extreme.
the trigger as part of the unload process.
Right. Or something even as extreme, and maybe this is a little off the wall, but never having a student do a downrange drill, in the sense of never having them they have to shoot past somebody, because that is such a massive hurdle until you take like something like force on force. Like most people don't ever point their gun in a direction of a human being until they have to, So
and you
what's
don't
some
want
example?
like real life to be the first time you ever do that, right?
Exactly.
Because you're learning as you go.
Let's address a perfect example of the failure of training, or the like you said, that Brian, the training is working. Yeah. Why are these guys NDing like nobody's business? Because that's what we taught them to do. We taught them to do that. You know, you ever seen a guy? All right, you guys with your rifle classes, you got the rifle slappers, right? The release slappers, slap, 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 slap. It's faster that way. It's faster. You know, it's faster that way, right? And we would frequently encounter. So I fought this battle nonstop for 3 years, and we had these Navy SEAL people who can't shoot. And they're like, no, man, you don't understand. Slapping the release is faster. No. Right? So they would teach their students. They're like, do and slap. And so we would have a student who would go boom, 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 click, or no boom, just click. And they would tap the magazine and they'd slap the side and they'd try and fire it again. And it wouldn't make any noise. And they were dumbfounded. They're like, and so we would have them, then they'd look at it like a hog looking at a wristwatch, and they hit it again. Like hitting it on the side was going to reload it.
Yeah.
And of course, in the coaches were like, Rack, pull the charging handle. Pull the charging handle. You didn't load it. Pull it. And they're like, oh, these guys they're so stupid. I'm like, they're not stupid. They did exactly what you taught them to do. In you know, that works. The training is working. You train them to fail.
Yeah.
And then when they fail, you're like, oh, they're stupid.
Right.
Or how many, you know, they pause in the middle of a shooting drill to press check their gun after they put a magazine in it. Like, why are you doing that? Keep shooting. Like,
and that falls under what I said earlier about training that results in the misapplication of the fundamentals, because one of the fundamentals is consistently doing the thing the right way. Right. So if you can do one thing like tap rack that loads and fixes a stoppage, et cetera, then you're doing one motion that fixes several problems. So if you choose to then tap slap instead, then that training is resulting in the misapplication of the fundamentals.
Yep.
Yeah, but you don't understand. It's faster.
Yeah. What were my splits though?
So
My split time.
Interesting story from our time at the tactical games. We were having a discussion. There was a day before. Was it called the warm up or the tune up? And so working with a couple of these people who compete regularly in these events, and they're kind of catching Joey and I up on the unload and show clear process, and explaining how if you're on your sights when you have your ND during unload and show clear, as long as it doesn't land within 10 feet of you, then it's not, you don't get kicked out. That's not a bad ND then. But if you're not on your sights and or it lands within 10 feet of you, then it's a bad ND. And like, I couldn't understand really.
ND? Do you get, is it a DQ if you drop your pistol?
I don't know.
Actually, yeah, I don't.
We didn't
Automatic DQ.
But I asked, you know, hey, like, so you've been to a ton of these tactical games and they're talking about how all the NDs happen. And I said, would you say that most or all NDs at the tactical games occurred during the unload and show clear process? And the person I was talking to, Joey's looking at me like, don't do it. Don't say it. It's a trap.
Yeah.
It's a trap.
And they're like, yeah, most all of them. And I'm like, oh man, like what if we just like did something different with our guns at the end of the, you know, course of fire? And she's like, no, I'm telling you, this is the best. And there's a lady and a guy who are both kind of like talking like, no, I'm telling you, this is the best unload and show clear process out of all the competitions.
Of all the what does John call it? Fiddling? Does John say fiddling? Of all the negligent fiddling practices, this is the best negligent fiddling practice.
What if we just remove that whole practice?
So when I said maybe we could do something else with our guns, she like, I got 6 heads growing, you know, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, just, you know, put it back in the holster. And they looked at me like I was trying to kill people because
you're dangerous.
But there'll be a round
dangerous
in the chamber, and it's like, yeah,
I know.
Who's dangerous?
That's the way
Yeah.
it's supposed
Literally,
to be.
they said we'll have people walking around with loaded guns.
Yeah,
and-
then people
Well,
will
we
be
can't
walking
have
around
that.
with- Yeah,
yeah.
loaded
Like,
chambers, but they
sorry,
won't
Their
be
insurance
So they-
company.
but here,
that's the
what is-
insurance thing?
What
Yeah.
two words did they mush together to create an event? What did they call it? They mushed them together and they called them
Yeah.
what?
Tactical games.
The what?
Yeah, exactly.
So explain to me how walking around with empty guns is tactical. Go.
Right. Yeah.
No,
Go. What
I'm not
is
defending that
tactical
position.
about having well, about fiddling?
Mhm.
What was tactical about gun fiddling?
Mm,
And see, that's the
yeah.
thing. We talk about this all the time. Do people, and I say when people have guns out in their hands pointing at the target, do they have negligent discharges? Well, what do you mean? Like, when do negligent discharges happen? Do they happen when people are purposely holding the gun, pointing it at the target? Well, no. When do they happen? Well, when they're clearing it and when they're like, oh, okay. So, and John said years ago, he said, the more time you spend, quote, administratively handling, the higher the percentage is, or the greater the opportunity for you to have a negligent discharge. Because that is when they happen. They don't happen when the gun's in the holster, unless it's a SIG 320, and they don't happen when you're got it in your hand pointing at a target. So when does it happen?
Mhm.
So the solution is we have to minimize and reduce the amount of unnecessary fiddling. Are you fiddling with the gun? Is there a reason you have it in your hand? What are you doing? Purposeful action. And see, that is, and it also goes back to the mindset of handling the gun as if it is a sword.
Mm.
How do we hold our sword? Like, how many times have you seen these people, like, they carry their rifles like luggage, man? It's like a purse, right? They just got it leaned over like a purse, or laying it, and they're using it as a rest or whatever. Everything we're talking about boils down to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Every bit of it.
Yep.
Every bit of it is a positive mindset, a negative mindset, is it a negligent mindset, is it a reckless mindset? Every single thing we're talking about in this last hour comes down to mindset. That's why it is the number one most important thing that we teach.
Yeah.
And that's why so few people do it.
And you touched on it at the start. People, and it's about the mindset stuff. People become careless and they stop taking it serious. And so that's why in our classes we tell people, like, when we tell you to have a sense of urgency, when we say that in these drills, we don't mean go fast. We mean do it like your life depends on it.
Exactly. That was something else that I was going to mention with the timers and the shots. You're like, how do we get people to not go? How do we get them to operate and function with a sense of urgency without putting them in the mindset of, I have to go fast.
Mm-hmm.
I have to beat a time, and can we do that? And how do we do that? And how do we put that into our program? Because, we don't use shot timers. And did both of you guys, I don't want to be redundant, but did both of you read the book?
Yes.
The How to Shoot Better Than Navy SEAL book? Okay. And I knew I was going to piss some people off when I said the shot timers were kindergartners. But I stand by that, because, like you said, being fast doesn't make you good, but being good can result in you being fast.
Yeah, fast is a result,
and
not a cause.
Yeah, exactly. So when people put their focus, I've seen it for 30 years, people who try to go fast that fumble, that just, how many times have we witnessed, or we known people who've shot themselves in the ass or the leg or the foot or the whatever, and when you go back down to it, most of them had shot timers on their belts.
Yep. 100%.
Yep.
They had shot timers on their belts. Wow. And we want to blame the Serpa, and we want to blame the 1911. We want to blame the Glock. Blame the fucking shot timer.
Mm-hmm.
You want to blame something? Blame the shot timer. That's why that dude, because he was trying to break. Oh, I was trying to break 1 second. I was trying to break my
Right.
record. I was trying to,
And those things, that time metric is just something that you can compare to other people. Where if your goal is mastery, your only metric should be being better than you were prior to whatever you're working on. So that, like, using that as a metric to show off to other people, look at my shot timer at the result of this, versus you actually trying to work towards that mastery for yourself is a big hang up on those things as well, I think.
Yeah.
Well, how do you measure yourself against other shooters? By height.
Hey,
Yeah.
Like I'll use something from, I think Matt said this, right? That Matt Reynolds with Barbell Logic Online Coaching. He said that like the strongman competitions, things like that they do not help you gain strength. They are a display of the strength that you have.
Right.
Right. How you gain strength is, well, you get strong by recovering from lifting heavy weights or lifting heavy things, right? The act of actually doing it doesn't make you strong, but the recovery process does. And then that display of strength can be used in competition. It's the same thing with firearms. You take what your display of mastery would be doing a competition, and the problem is you can't tactically do one and win most of the time. But the concept is the same, right? The display of being good with a firearm is actually doing it, right? And then, but what it takes to get there and be good with that firearm is dedication and doing the right thing when nobody else is looking. And it's the same thing.
Give me a minute. Give me 1 minute.
We're going to wrap up pretty soon.
I apologize. Okay. Yeah, but I still need 1 minute.
Yeah.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Go for it. Because Jared, I got one that may cause, and we could get started on it, or do you want me to wait for Dad to get back?
Let's do this while he's gone. Us three forgot to do intros of ourselves.
Okay.
So,
oh shit, yeah.
Zach, we're gonna do intros that you can just drop in with the, before the person actually starts talking. Make sense?
Yeah, we can do that. We can do that if you want.
Would you rather do it as separate videos after this, or?
Yeah, breaking it off would be a lot easier than me having to remember to come in here and cut it out of the middle. So
okay.
Just remember once we wrap up.
Lewis.
Yeah.
So the dangerous training thing and where is the line, right? I had a training experience. You know how you have certain watershed training experiences kind of through your journey. I had one that was kind of illuminating and made me really question how far I think I can go in terms of what I would accept as acceptable levels of danger in training. And I'll give you the scenario. It was a pistol class. We were going to be unloading, showing clear to each other. Our partner, whoever we were going to be working with, we were going to confirm guns were unloaded, ammunition away. And we were going to be kind of drawing against each other. When you see movement from the other one, you can draw your gun, move out,
Yep.
that sort of thing.
I think I've done this same class.
Okay. So prior to that, obviously, I like having my gun loaded. So I didn't preemptively unload my gun. The instructor was making a point, and asked me, "Hey, Lewis, go ahead, grab your gun and aim in at my face." And I said, "Well, mine's still hot. I haven't downloaded yet." And he was like, "Okay, so just draw and aim in at my face." And I showed and touched my magazine well. And I'm like, "But it's, and he's like, "Why is this taking so long? I'm trying to make a point. Can you please, aim in?" And even as it as it cleared the holster, I kind of like came out to a low ready. It's like there was like an invisible force that wouldn't allow me to cross my muzzle against, across a human being. And I mean, I've done tons of force on force training and stuff like that. But again, like your dad said, you can't trick the mind or your own mind. Like when I do force on force stuff, I know I have a blue gun, or a sim gun in my hands. And so there was that huge hesitation to me to actually put my sights on another human being. And he was like, you're going to keep your finger straight, right? Like you're not touching the trigger, right? Like that's not part of your draw stroke. And I was like, yeah, no. And he's like, all right, so do it. And it just felt like after that, like chains had been kind of pulled off of me. Um, and like, I mean, I had recurring dreams every once in a while where like, some bad situation's happening and you're like, gun is like glued into your holster, or you got it at low ready as the mob just tackles you and you're like, I should have gotten it out a little bit sooner. And like since that training moment, like that hasn't been a concern of mine anymore. Like it was that dangerous training. Like does that cross the line? Like we broke firearm safety rules, right?
Yeah. Surely when I'm pretty sure that I took the same class that you're talking about. And when I was in that class, it surely crossed the line that I, at that moment in time, considered acceptable. But then that's one of those things where, was it Cooper Dad that said, if you break more than one safety rule, that's when people bleed? Or was that a rendition?
It could have been Hackthorne. It could have been a lot of people. But yeah, essentially, when someone is negligently shot and you dissect it, you always have to go back and say, all right, it wasn't just one. It's never just one. It's always multiple. And I had a conversation with Ralph Morose years and years ago about how do police officers get away with not shooting people that shouldn't be shot when they're always pointing guns at them. Right. Like they're not pointing the gun at the ground. Like cops point loaded guns at people. Right. And but then they don't die because they didn't stroke the trigger. Right. And we went over you say, okay, so if we look at the rules, which one is really important? Like really important. Like when it comes down to making sure people don't get shot who shouldn't be shot. Right. And what we basically came up with, or in Ralph's supposition, was that this one that is super, 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 super important. He said you can get away with violating the other ones as long as you don't do that one. But the trick is, the converse is, what do gun community people do? They break this one more than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Because what? Because why? Because we train them to reflexively snap triggers, or we allow them to snatch up guns and put their finger on it like it's this comfort spot or whatever, it's that lack of discipline.
Yeah. And I think to build on what you just said, Dad, I think that the point that instructor was making, because he also, if it's the same guy that I'm thinking of, he also, I think it was him in the same class, maybe it's a different class or a different instructor. Who knows at this point? I've trained so many times, but there was one instructor that had challenged that the rule of do not put your finger on the trigger until your sights are online and you've made the decision to shoot. And, so when I go to training, it's like a potluck, like Ken Hackathorn says. It's like, just try what they want you to do, as long as it's not dangerous in a negative way, as long as it's acceptably dangerous. And so try it and do it. And if you like it, then keep it. If you don't like it, then just throw it out and look for those golden nuggets. So the instructor said something like, you don't need to wait to put your finger on the trigger because of, can't remember the reason, because it was so challenging for me to just do that in training. And because all like the startle response and all the things that you can't control as a human, that's why I think it's really important to keep that rule is the most important, to keep your finger straight and off the trigger until your sights are on target and you made a decision to shoot. But to expand upon that, I think that as long as you're doing the thing deliberately, like when you pointed a gun that you either knew or thought was loaded at another
Mhm.
human, I almost guarantee you did that very, very deliberately.
Mhm.
Correct? So
Yeah.
if you're doing the thing deliberately and you're not breaking more than 2 of the rules, then you're probably going to be okay. It's when you get out of the training, the training realm, right? You get off the range and you go out in your daily life when you're tired and you're scared for whatever reason something's going on, and you're already tired because it's a shitty day, and now it's even more shitty day because this dude over here decided to come in the mall with a freaking rifle, and all you got's a pistol. So now you got to take care of it. It's in those
Or you lose
moments.
because you can't beat a rifle with a pistol.
That's right. Yeah, you can't beat a rifle with a pistol. Well, you know what? There was an Israeli that beat an RPG with a Glock 9mm. So
Whoa.
I saw a movie. It was called Red, and
that's right.
and they did that.
Yeah. So it's in those instances that our training is extremely important, because what we train ourselves to do and what our habits become is what we will do. You default to the level that you've mastered, especially when you're tired and all these other things that happen to us humans when we're out there in the world.
Well, and for as far as negligence is concerned, the reason we hammer those universal safety rules is, and I'll tell people, like, look, the rules aren't so much for you when you're fresh and alert. I said the rules have to be there when you're not fresh, when you're not alert, when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you're distracted. You have to do it right, even though you're hungry, tired, and distracted. That's when you have to do it right. I had a situation when I was a police officer, and I came home and it was like really late, and I was like trying to, the kids were little, and I was trying to take all my stuff off and what have you. And I had pulled the gun out of the holster, and it was one of those weird things where part of me wanted to press the trigger. It was like one of those weird things where part of me is like, oh, the gun's in your hand, you should press the trigger. And then another part of me is like, no,
Yeah.
don't do that. Right. And like I said, it was one of those end of the night, 2 o'clock. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning or something stupid like that. And the reason that I didn't have a negligent discharge was because I had those, it was so ingrained in me by that point in time that not to do that. And there have been times when I legitimately thought that the gun was probably empty, and I'm going to admit to you guys, I've had so many guns come and go that not every gun that I own has a round in the chamber right now. I mean, I'll be honest.
You're in a safe
with you.
space. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I have one on my body that does, but I mean, there have been times over the last 30 to 40 years that I will pause and I'm like, oh, hang on a second. It's like, oh, okay. I'm glad I didn't just negligently. I'm glad I didn't just, and that is how that happens. And people, Farnham said in 86, John Farnham said there's 3 types of gun owners: those who've had NDs, those who will have an ND, and those who lie about it. And John actually told us about an ND that happened to him in 86, where someone had been, that he knew he left the gun in a certain condition, but somebody had picked it up and farted around with it that he didn't know of. And he thought, and he told us he thought it was empty because that's how he left it. And he stroked the trigger and it went boom. And he knew he didn't leave it that way. And so and the reason he told us that story, he says, if the gun has been out of your control, you must assume that it's loaded. It doesn't matter what you do and what your way of thinking is. If that gun wasn't in your control, it's loaded. And treat it like that.
And if it is in your control, it should probably be loaded.
It should be too. But yeah. So in one thing that I wanted to finish up with, Jared, is what you said. I actually have been thinking about this for quite a while, and it's interesting that we have the like-minded, kind of the mind meld thing, the Vulcan. Physical training and strength training mirrors firearms training so often. You know, I've had conversations with Matt, and I'm like, dude, do you see this? And he's like, oh, all the time. And I said, dude, you're like firearms training, you know, you really are. And so in what Matt said, and what he explained was there's strength development, and then there's the expression of strength.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And he said, so you going out in the parking lot and flipping a tire, he said, that is an expression of strength. He said, and it's fun and it looks cool to people and people are impressed, you know. And that's what he said about the strongman games. The strongman games are an expression of strength. He said, but the people who compete and win in strongman games, they don't go to the gym like a bunch of Flintstones and like pick up rocks all, you know. They don't go to a gym that's filled with rocks and tires. Rocks and tires. That's not how they got strong.
No, they all train at Planet Fitness.
Yeah, they all train it. No, they got strong through focusing on the very difficult, unsexy, not fun, but critical strength development. And we see the exact same thing in the firearms world.
Yep.
All these Instagram models, you know, they're like, watch me do this, and it started back in the VHS DVD days with Haley and freaking Costa and their freaking mobile roadshow of clown tricks. Right? It just carried on into Instagram. But everybody wants to do what they're doing is they're doing the expression of skill. The watch me shoot fast, watch me roll over and flip and that's the expression of skill. But the development of skill is something that is altogether different. And it's much more difficult, and it's not sexy. Doesn't look cool. But so what we see and what we encounter is people go to a public gym. The number of people in the squat rack is TT, right? It's nothing. The people over in the cable machines.
Yeah.
Oh, because that's how they they look cool. That's how you do the cool, interesting stuff, right? But that's what you need to do though, and I see the guys over in we have like the little green AstroTurf area, and they've got all the stuff, and they're doing the and the hip and hopping all around and stuff. And I was like, dude, you should just go get in the squat rack if you want to be strong. Just go squat, go deadlift, and you get strong. Like, yeah, but that doesn't look cool, man. So between whether it's strength training or whether it's firearms training, that it's a very close parallel, because what we see is people who want to do the things that look cool because it's an expression of skill, but they want to skip over the skill development part.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's how these guys go to one class, then they buy themselves a shot timer, and they're gonna be Max Michel, right? You know, because they got a shot timer. Now
my experience is that students will do what you tell them to do, especially if they're coming out of their first class. So if the instructor says you need a shot timer, they're probably going to go get one. But if they get good training and the instructor says, go do these things to focus on the fundamentals, and that's probably what
dummy
they'll do.
rounds.
You don't have to tell them to buy a shot timer. They saw you using one and they decided that's what they needed to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they saw the other 1,000 people with 1 million followers had one on his belt.
The Instagram models.
Yep. They're going to get that. They're going to get that model shot timer, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
That's the best
Interesting how our
one.
brains work. I want to wrap this up.
Yes.
Joey, Lewis, and I have something that we have to do before we can jump off this call. So, yeah, thank you guys for joining and spending your time talking about this. I appreciate all your guys' insights on it. If you, as the listener, if you're listening to this and you are a professional in the industry and you'd like to add to what we've said or dispute anything that we've said, please do that. You can do that in a video reply, or you can just email me directly, jarrad@studentofthegun.com. If it's valid and your background permits, then maybe you'll join us on a call to discuss. That would be fantastic. I would love this panel to turn into something that's a big thing that we can come back and say, oh, we've got this panel of experts that we have this question today. Like, for instance, we said something earlier. What was it? I wrote it down because it's a topic that we should do the same thing with. How to be a good student. Like, what makes a good student? I think that would be really helpful for both instructors and students. So that kind of stuff, I think that I would like to turn the Student of the Gun study hall into this deep discussion on to answer these questions that either have been answered in the past and we kind of lost it from the people that came before us, or haven't been answered yet. So thank
There
you
you go.
guys for joining in. Really appreciate it. Where do they go? Where do these listeners go to find more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, as usual, you can find us over on YouTube. It's under James Yeager. We're still keeping this thing going. His goal was to train as many people as possible, and that's ours as well. Still putting out free information as much as we can, give away for free on the YouTubes, Instagrams, Tactical Response, TikTok. We're all over everything. And then of course we've got our own platform, Liber TV, where we can upload some more stuff that is not necessarily YouTube approved. Don't have to fight the algorithm on there. So if you're wanting some behind the scenes stuff, or if you just want to pay the $10 just to watch some old Andy Stanford videos,
Yeah.
those are on there as well. So
Yeah, a lot of feature length training resources available. What used to be our $50 DVDs for one class, all of them are on Liber TV.
Oh, that's nice.
That you can get at $10 a month.
Is Fat James on there?
oh man, I don't know if like the original cut of Shooting Mythology's on there. I know we have the new cut of
Because
it.
he used to refer to the videos as he goes, is it pre or post?
Yeah,
He said we have post Fat James and we have pre. You're like, how can you say that about him? He said it about himself.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, because that's when they did the cutoff. Because he was producing DVDs. He was producing. I don't think he ever did VHS tapes, but he was producing DVDs, like the original, the original fighting rifle ones, the original fighting pistol ones, and like I said, Shooting Mythology and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you like what you see on those things, then you can find us at tacticalresponse.com to sign up for a class.
Thank you
You've
very
got
much.
your marching orders, tacticalresponse.com. Obviously, for anything related to Student of the Gun, Paul Markle, Jared Markle, Zach Markle, studentofthegun.com. Join us for our training. We've got a hybrid university that we released where you've got the online portion, where we've got the home study where you take the classroom portion online so that you can consume the material before you come to residency. And what that does is it offers us the ability to just start on the range. So we'll immediately start on the range, quickly go over the any questions that people have about the classroom portion, and we quickly go over the classroom portion itself as well. But it allows us to spend more time actually building the skill than spending the time in the classroom. So that's a really good thing that I appreciate that we've done. And ask me, I'll tell you. But go to SOTGU.com.
Ask me how great it is, I'll tell you.
That's right. Ask me how good it is, I'll tell you. SOTGU.com. Join us for training there. We're actually going to be teaching a class at Tactical Response in March. Would love to have you guys join us there.
Yes.